All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Lena Kaiser. Welcome to today's briefing about the digital divide and its impact on education and the economy in North Carolina. Joining us today, we have Beverly Perdue, former governor of North Carolina, managing director at Purdue Strategy and founder of DigiLearn. We have Senator Deanna Ballard, co-chair of the Senate Education and Education Appropriations Committees. And we have Dr. Sharon Contreras, superintendent of Guilford County Schools. Thank you all for being here today. The briefing will consist of 3 presenters I mentioned, each speaking for 5 minutes, followed by 15 minutes of Q&A with reporters. For the reporters who have joined us today, please share your questions in the video conference's chat box feature with your name and your outlet, and we'll address questions in order. The video of the briefing will be available online after the call and at your request. Now, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Beverly Perdue, the former governor of North Carolina and managing director at Purdue Strategy and founder of DigiLearn. Welcome, Governor.
Thank you, Lena. Good morning. We're glad to have you virtually in North Carolina today, you and Raleigh. And I'm honored to be on a panel with Senator Ballard and Dr. Contreras. So you're going to get 3 good perspectives. Mine's more focused on the whole state, as you would expect. 5 months ago, we were all living an ordinary life, and all of a sudden we woke up and we heard about this thing called COVID-19 and a global pandemic. And we find ourselves right in the thrust of it now in North Carolina as the hospitalizations went up again yesterday. That changed all of our lives. It was not just education. Education was dramatically impacted as parents had to become teachers and as schools had to really transition quickly to virtual. And they did a good job of that because North Carolina had laid down the infrastructure. But more than education, which is so tied to the economy, we saw our economy tank. We're in a $5 billion hole as we speak today. And with the economy came the challenges of how do you keep doing your work while everybody is at home isolating themselves. And on top of that, doctors weren't welcoming you into the hospital because of the danger of contagion. And so you found out that a regular doctor's office became a virtual conference or a Zoom meeting. So the whole world began to revolve around technology and around the internet, around your phone or your computer that you're hooked up to right now. And as you looked at other states, we knew quickly in North Carolina that our state was a little bit ahead of many of the states because we've always been a leader in technology. In the early 2000s, some of us decided that broadband connectivity internet in a state that has 80 of the 100 counties rural was essential, not just to kids, but to businesses and to healthcare. And so we worked with partners in the federal government in 2009 during the recession and laid down really strong fiber and connectivity in all 100 counties. So when teachers all of a sudden had to become mobile teachers and parents had to become mobile teachers' assistants, the world was fairly ready for that piece of the educational system. But as we got into the pandemic and as we've seen the data after school let out, the digital divide, that terrible known fact of the haves and the have-nots in North Carolina, became much larger than any of us had thought. We always knew that the Constitution, North Carolina's Constitution, guaranteed every child a free and equitable education, public school education. And that's the reason we laid down the internet initially in 2009, because if you were a poor kid from a poor county, then you could get a great teacher through the internet. Well, as we expanded that, we realized that there were still problems. And the data from the pandemic has shown us that of the 1.5 million kids in the state, about that many, about 600,000 of them do not have a device at home and do not have connectivity at home, the internet. And so the kid can learn and use the internet when the kid's in school, but when he or she goes home, there's no connectivity. And that in itself became a major impediment to equality, to equity in education. And so what do? You begin to figure out how we're going to solve the problem. And that's what today's about. The pandemic has made us all realize that, once again, infrastructure in North Carolina and America doesn't just include water and sewer and technology, water and sewer and plumbing and electricity. It includes technology. So in the definition, Senator Ballard, technology should be wrapped right into that definition. And we need to figure out a way to finance a massive infusion of infrastructure into our cities and small towns and schools and hospitals. What does that require? That requires leadership. It requires folks like you and me stepping up, working with the business community and with our partners in government and in the civic world to make an investment in infrastructure for the country and for the state. It's time that we did a reality check as school starts and kids go back to school. One way or the other, parents are facing that decision right now. Am I going to go back virtually, or am I going to send my child back to the real school building? Those are all really deep, thought-provoking questions for parents to face. And as those questions are answered, the business community also is deciding how they're going to continue to do business in the times of COVID-19. And so there is a fusion of energy around this need to invest. And so this morning, as we talk about partnerships, we recall the partnership with the federal government in 2009, when we were at a loss for revenue across the country. And a group of folks went to Washington and worked with the president and worked with the Congress and convinced them that a major part of their stimulus bill, the rebuilding of America in 2009, had to include infrastructure. And that meant technology in rural and urban America. I would believe that the stimulus bill that's before the Congress today, that's going to be voted on in the next 4 or 5 days, maybe 10 days, there has to be an emphasis on North Carolina's participation and support for that infrastructure and for that technology. I'm being told that the bill to do the country is about $4 billion. That's not a lot of money. It sounds like a lot of money, but when you think about what that brings home to families and to employees and to communities, as we develop a new life that does have the internet and connectivity at its center of our workplace and of our school place and of our home place, then it becomes a good investment and not so much money. I would urge you to help me talk to Senator Burr and Senator Tillis and ask them to please support this kind of investment for all of the people of North Carolina, not just the children. I'm delighted to be with you this morning, and I hope you understand how passionate I am about this whole thing called connectivity. You know, I grew up in a really rural, poor community, and I had access to great teachers and great connectivity way back in the day, I might have done something else. But in a rural county in North Carolina, there's no way that children have the same ability, the same equity that kids in urban areas have. So help us connect those children to the very best education possible.
Thank you so much, Governor. Reporters, just a reminder to enter your questions into the chat box and with whom it is directed to, and include your outlet. Now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Senator Deanna Ballard, co-chair of the Senate Education and Education Appropriations Committees. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you very much. Governor Perdue, I certainly appreciate your remarks and comments and your leadership on this as well. And Superintendent Contreras, I just thank you for joining us today. And I look forward to hearing about more specifics on Guilford County and kind of what you guys are doing too. But as I speak into what the state has done, even in recent months, but even in recent years regarding connectivity and broadband development, I'm proud to say that we have continued those efforts in trying to establish the infrastructure that's needed, as well as the service providers and working with service providers to really ensure that our students and families are connected. I live in Watauga County. I represent 5 counties in the mountains of northwest North Carolina. And in Watauga County, it's also home to App State University. So I'm also not dealing with just with K-12 students. I'm dealing with, college students who live on off campus, but also there's faculty, there's teachers. And I think sometimes we may forget about teachers needing to teach from home remotely and understanding the needs that they might have as well, and a lack of connectivity too. So I've spoken with even several faculty members in recent months as well, who have just not been able to connect and get the service that they need in order to do their job. So this is a priority for me, and this is something that I think our legislature has continued to make a priority and continue to push forward. A couple of things we've done in recent years. One, North Carolina established the GREAT program, which is really significantly encouraging the deployment of broadband through partnerships and competition between providers and cooperatives, and really kind of gearing that towards some of your rural counties, such as Tier 1 and Tier 2 counties in North Carolina. The General Assembly has committed to more than $150 million to that over the next 10 years. That's just a great investment moving forward and thinking ahead. And that's something that's been going on since, I think, 2018 as well. In recent months, we've received in partnership with our federal friends, we've received dollars towards education. But as a portion of that, we were able to authorize and use, I would say, close to probably $60 million for our K-12 systems to use in connectivity related needs. And that's anything from devices to Wi-Fi in buses to also including some of that expansion dollars to the GREAT program. But we couldn't have done that also without the help and the support of our senators and our representatives in Congress. So, working with Senator Tillis' office and thankful for his help and the funding that they've been able to secure and move down to North Carolina to support our communities has been instrumental and just valuable and effective moving forward. I think that there's still more work to do. I think our broadband infrastructure office in North Carolina actually has some recent studies that show that there's disparities in adoption of broadband services with both a rural, urban, and an income divide. So, for example, rural households tend to subscribe at lower rates than your urban households. So let's say 50% in Graham County, which is a rural county, to as high as about 90% in Wake County, which is, of course, home to Raleigh. You may notice or experience, too, that households making under $20,000 a year subscribe at nearly like a 49%, 51% rate compared to nearly 94% of those making maybe $75,000 or more. So I think the COVID-19 related, basically disruption to the education system and to our 9-to-5 work week has really just sort of magnified and amplified the need and the priority that this needs to be moving forward as well. So I'm excited to be a part of what we've been able to do with the Republican legislature. And I'm just excited to see kind of what might come down and how we can work with our partners and the team members on this phone call here. But I have to give a shout out to, the local school districts. They've been really resourceful and really just dialed in and innovative on, how to meet those needs where they are. And they've done anything from really, like I mentioned before, putting Wi-Fi hotspots on buses and parking them in a cul-de-sac, and kids can come in and, download information. And this is just in, Western North Carolina and the Appalachian Mountains. This is kind of areas where these ideas and these actions are taking place. They've been, of course, take-home packets, written materials that have been secured and been able to be executed and dropped off. But there's just been a lot of work that's been done. And I just want to give a big thanks to our superintendents, to the principal leadership within the schools, to our teachers, and to the parents who have pivoted and who really begin to understand what their needs are, even at home, and really engaging in that side of things. But again, just grateful to be a part of today and happy to do and be as helpful as I can moving forward.
Thank you so much, Senator. Just a reminder to reporters to continue putting your questions in the chat box with your name and outlet. Our next speaker is Dr. Sharon Contreras, Superintendent of Guilford County Schools. welcome, Dr. Contreras. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Governor Perdue and Senator Ballard for your past and your current service on behalf of North Carolinians. It is much appreciated. While it's impossible to know for sure, and we've reviewed many data sources, including our current Guilford County Schools parent and student surveys, and our poverty data, it appears that about 17% of our families do not have access to high-speed internet broadband connectivity. Our census data reports that 18% of Guilford County families do not have access. In addition, 26% of Latino families, 20% of our Black families reported not having enough devices in the home to support the number of students who must participate in school remotely for 4 to 6 hours a day. Our free and reduced lunch counts before the pandemic, before these huge increases in unemployment, was 67%. And we have approximately 3,000 homeless students, many of them living in shelters, hotels, and motels. We know that students in poverty are more likely to live in households without high-speed internet. In fact, the percentages of Black and Latino children with high-speed internet without high-speed internet nearly doubles when the family annual income is less than $30,000 a year. 97% of our students accessed online learning, remote learning during the spring. However, about 2,300 students never logged on. Another 4,200 students only logged in during the first week or two. And there were thousands more who could only log on sporadically. Clearly, the U.S. education system was not built to deal with extended shutdowns like those imposed by a pandemic. We shut down at a time when achievement disparities persist across income levels and between white students and their Black and Latino peers. Clearly, the shutdown is exacerbating learning loss for these students and increases disproportionality. As Secretary Arne Duncan said, no internet means no school. No device also means no school. When schools closed in March, we immediately went into action to try to make sure that as many students as possible had access to internet and had devices. But we had very few devices ourselves in the school system. We distributed more than 17,000. Our community partner, the Guilford Education Alliance, partnered with Technology for the Future and raised funds to purchase 10,000 refurbished laptops that were given to students. The district expanded outdoor hotspots for internet access in school parking lots so that students who lacked connectivity could come into our parking lots and download materials. And thanks to a generous donation from Chiefs for Change, we also rolled out smart buses into communities in Greensboro and High Point. Each smart bus managed up to 65 connections, and the Wi-Fi reach for each was about 300 feet. And the buses went into large apartment complexes, mobile home parks, and neighborhoods where census data indicated a lack of connectivity. But let's be honest, our children, those of us on the panel, won't be sitting in a parking lot trying to do their work or leaning against a bus trying to get their work done. And philanthropy is an inadequate solution to systemic racial inequities, and the digital divide is exacerbating the racial wealth gap. Districts, particularly large urban districts, are committed to mitigating learning loss due to the pandemic. In addition to the nearly incalculable issues we are attempting to address as a result of the failure to control this pandemic, gaps in educational performance that have far-reaching impact on our GDP and, more importantly, our democracy rise to the forefront. Lack of devices, internet connectivity is a threat to our very way of life in this country. I applaud our teachers for the work they've done, but I ask the FCC to wield its influence over telecom companies on behalf of low-income students to also distribute the billions of dollars under its authority for libraries and schools so that we can purchase hotspots. I ask that North Carolina General Assembly please try to negotiate with telecom companies so that we can provide more technology and internet connectivity to families. Further, our educational system cannot simply be dependent on the funding decisions of local bodies like boards of county commissions or city councils. In honor of Representative John Lewis, who is being laid to eternal rest today, I encourage Congress to get in some good trouble today on behalf of the nation's most vulnerable children and families by closing the digital divide once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll be moving into the Q&A portion now. And the first question is for Dr. Contreras. I'll go back to you. This is from Greg Childress of North Carolina Policy Watch. He asked specifically, how prepared do you feel your district is to provide online instruction in the fall, given what you've shared?
We've made significant improvements since the spring. However, even with going back to school, when we return to the classroom with the social distancing guidelines, we still require additional staff, and that requires splitting classes in half, having an additional staff person in another room, and having technology so that both classrooms can observe the teacher teaching, one teacher teaching. So that's a problem for us, having that technology. You're going to need one-to-one initiatives, even if class is in session, because we're going to need the social distancing for some time. So I think we continue to struggle with internet connectivity. We continue to struggle with enough devices. And we even struggle in school with how we project the lessons so that all students can have synchronous instruction.
Thank you so much, Dr. Contreras. The next question is for Governor Perdue. This is from John Carter of WBTV News in Charlotte. Is it possible to achieve 100% internet connectivity for all students in North Carolina working remotely? If schools are doing remote learning, is it fair to students who cannot achieve connectivity? What happens to them?
I don't believe you'll ever have 100% of anything in North Carolina or in America, but that's the goal. That's the goal for all of us. John, I believe that what Dr. Contreras says is true. You have to step up with the telecoms. We did that in the early 2000s. We're doing it now. The telecoms have got to play in the last mile. That's where the problem comes. You know, we don't get that connectivity to the really rural areas. It's chicken or egg. And so we've got to push there. We've got to also manipulate the E-rate and work with the FCC because they are major players in how much reimbursement a county system, city system, or the state gets from the federal government with the connectivity dollars. I'm concerned about the parents. We haven't discussed that much today. There are many children who don't have, we know that about a third of the kids in the state may have trouble with the connectivity, may have trouble with devices. I believe that if we try hard this fall, we can all pitch in and make sure that those issues are fairly well covered. That's something that we can do one-on-one with community outreach until the federal government can step in. I do worry again about the parents. What about the child whose mom or dad or grandmother is an essential worker and has to leave the home, and the child is there with nobody to help with the lessons? And the teacher can teach all he or she can, but the problem becomes, does the kid assimilate it? I've got 5 grandchildren, and I've been blessed enough this spring to be in their house when all of this was going on. The parents that I know are stressed out of the wazoo. It's just hard to imagine the stress on teachers who are also working parents as teachers while they're managing their kids' learning. I think that's the arena that school boards and school leaders and the General Assembly and me can be involved in. How do we provide that in-home assistance, that support that folks really need to make it work across the state? And then with the devices and the connectivity and that kind of parental support, I believe that learning gap can be at least brought down a bit. Right now, I'm hearing that the learning loss may be up to a year academically. I don't know that there's good data on that yet, but I'm fearful of that for the kids who are already behind. This is a matter of equity, and our Constitution guarantees equal and equitable access. And so I think, just like Leandro has been out there for more than 15 years, this is a really good new addition to the Leandro lawsuits. We've got to make this happen.
Thank you so much, Governor. Our next question is for Senator Ballard. According to the recent national report from Common Sense Media, 10% of teachers in North Carolina don't have access to broadband at home. If we expect teachers to do live video instruction in the fall, what can the legislator do to close that part of the digital divide?
Thanks for the question. I definitely have asked that question of some of our State Board of Education members and DPI as well, to really get an understanding on what teachers or resources are still needed, what can be done. I think looking at devices, we talk about devices a lot, and I think we should talk about that through the lens of what teachers might need as well. But I think it's also important to understand there's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of information or data out there on devices that's not updated and not accurate. So it's important for us in the legislature to really get a handle with Department of Public Instruction, that's our education agency in the state, to understand who has what, who has secured what they need as far as devices, and then understanding what gap we need to fill there. So some of this is really kind of still in the information. We're trying to gather this information to figure out where the holes are and what is needed. I think some of that, the local counties and the districts have been trying to pull that together too. So that's one area. I think another area that's important for folks to be investing in and looking at as we think about federal dollars coming back down to the state is really kind of professional development for our teachers and how to help them understand how to teach remotely in this setting. And some are, have never done it before in their life, or maybe, have taught for 20 some years and just need some education and training on how best to really utilize this tool and resource now when it's needed. Again, there's nothing that's going to really there's nothing that's going to substitute and replace like in-class instruction and the value of that. But this remote learning and delivering remote instruction was something that in the General Assembly, we worked with the State Board of Education on to really introduce into the culture of education. On March 15th, I sat on the call with the State Board of Education and said that North Carolina is more poised than ever to really change the culture of education in our state. And so I think we're all really trying to grasp that, really understand how to move forward, how to help those teachers when they're working from home and teaching from home, but also ensuring that our students really receive just that the best instruction so that they can just succeed moving forward as well. Like Governor Perdue said, I've heard kind of that same statistic on a year possibly of learning loss. And that's just a domino effect for the economy of the state, the workforce, when you're looking at kids in those younger grades and the reading and the literacy. So there's just a lot of things going on right now that we're just all trying to work together, working together, especially with the business community as well. I just do a strong charge to our providers and companies that are out there. I think we've done a good job with infrastructure. The electric co-ops have even come in recent years. We've been able to expand some legislation there to allow them to drop more infrastructure in our hard to reach areas. The problem is just really getting those providers in there to secure that service to the home. So I'm grateful for all the private corporations who have stepped in. I'm thankful for just those nonprofits who have stepped in as well moving forward. So it's just going to take everybody really working together and really targeting our efforts on how to secure this and how to help those teachers.
Thank you so much, Senator. My next question is back to Dr. Contreras. This is from John Carter of WBTV News in Charlotte. He asked, how would you compare the learning curve between in-person classes versus remote and virtual classes?
It's difficult for both students and teachers. And I often use the analogy of what it took to even move instruction at the primary grades to include classroom centers. It took a couple decades to move to that. Now, this is much more complicated. We also know remote learning, virtual learning, has a very low efficacy rate. I do believe that is going to improve because it's getting better and better, and this pandemic has forced us to improve and forced the model to improve. However, for many children, especially those with low reading levels in the first place, again, those who are not accustomed to having technology or high-speed connectivity in their homes, this is going to be a huge struggle. So that 1 year learning loss is exacerbated for the most vulnerable children. So I don't want us to just generalize those numbers. It is worse for the poorest children in this country, the poorest children in this state, who also happen to be children of color.
Thank you so much, Dr. Contreras. The next question is back to Governor Perdue. From Cole DeCharco with WUNC, he asked, Governor Perdue, what do you think the federal and state government could do to reduce the gap in access to the internet and technology for students, since there is such a large number of students who do not have equal access? Is there a feasible way for this kind of infrastructure investment to have any change in this time period that is needed for so many schools to go remote during the current pandemic? There are two questions there.
Lena, I hate to be bottom line, but I am always bottom line. You come back to the money. This is a question of resources. If North Carolina were granted through incentives or direct grants, several $100 million, I think back when we laid down the infrastructure, it was almost $1 billion in partnership with the telecoms. Then the leadership of the state, the governor, the folks who make the decisions, Senator Ballard and others, could come together with the business community, the telecoms, and do it expeditiously. Lay down the structures, get the devices and the connectivity to the homes. Let me remind all of us that this is not just an educational issue. I believe in this state and across the country, you're successful in selling education when you also remind the leaders of a community and the businesses of a community that education is good economic development. We are training the next generation of workers, and we will poorly train them if a third of them are left behind. We need those workers in a global economy. And so again, it's money. Let's convince our two United States senators and the Congress to fund this $4 billion. I don't think it's enough money, but it's a start and doing exactly what the question asks. How do you get it out there quickly and make it work? You do it with money and then with the support of the state leaders and the citizens and teachers and parents.
May I add to that, Lena?
Please do.
Yeah, I just want to, again, kind of reiterate the need, just as a reminder as well, that the state budget going into the next year will be experiencing a shortfall. So what's critical more than ever is for our federal partners to step in and to help and to assist in various areas. The state, as we've mentioned, the GREAT program that I mentioned, there have been over 10,000 households and 600 businesses from, even farms to libraries to schools, all those community establishments as well that have been a recipient of what the state has invested in, will continue to invest in, again, over the next decade. And that's something we're committed to. But just looking at the overall budget picture into the next year, we're going to have to, we need help. And this is where we can work together, but we can also work, again, like Governor mentioned, the business community, and really securing just assistance and how to create those partnerships that are going to benefit our families and our communities.
Thank you, Senator Ballard. We do have time for just one last question, and this actually comes back to you, Senator Ballard. This is from John Carter of WBTV in Charlotte. This is specific to the internet providers. What type of response are you getting from internet providers to make sure that children and students have access to internet?
Specifically up in, I would say even in my region, again, I'm up here in Boone and Ashe County, Allegheny, Wilkes, Surrey. That's kind of the territory that I work in. I would say in Watauga County, I have about 20% of students who, this was, I guess, probably a little right before the pandemic, who had who could not secure internet at home, did not have Wi-Fi. I've been trying to work with local providers and establishing, kind of understanding, kind of why those needs are still unmet. And again, sometimes it comes down to, well, it's just not profitable for them. But what providers have done during the pandemic has sort of those that have the infrastructure already there, or who have services or have offered subscription services to them at either to families at a discounted rate, or but it's only for a limited time. So it's not even for the duration of the pandemic right now, which, we know is ongoing. My point is, there's still more room, in my opinion, for them to kind of step up to the plate and really understand the needs that are on our schools, on those students, on those teachers, but on those, those working families, and how we can figure out some sort of model and understanding, and I don't know, and really trying to, I guess, capture that last mile that we always continue to talk about. But again, I'm going to go back to infrastructure is not always the problem. I feel like I can drop infrastructure in some of these backwoods, Appalachian Mountain. I can get that. I've done that. We've done that. It's more of the service provider stepping up and being willing to come in and just drop service into those just hard to reach areas. So we're still working through ideas, always open to ideas from the constituents and from folks too, but appreciate your help.
Thank you so much, Senator. Well, that concludes our program. I want to say a huge thank you to our three panelists for joining us today and for their remarks and for answering questions. Again, the full video of the briefing will be available right after this on the Guilford County Schools YouTube page. We'll be sharing that link. And if you have further questions or would like to request an interview with any of our speakers today, please contact me directly. Again, my name is Lena Kaiser, and my phone number is 708-769-4878. And my email is lkaiser@wearerally.com. I'll share this information in the chat box as well. Thank you so much again for everyone for joining us today.